All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Hello. I hope you're all having a nice day. Today, I'm going to be talking about a very great essay that came out pretty recently. I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, in the Point magazine, written by Mr. Asad Haider. I think the essay is called like Dismissal or something. I'll put a link to it in the description below. You can go read it. The Point has a paywall, but you can read like the first three articles for free or something, I think. I'm not going to be like talking about it like every single thing that is in that essay. I'm not going to be going through it exhaustively. But there are three important concepts that Assad lays out in that essay, um, which we can use to, relate that very momentous historical occasion that we call the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution to, contemporary instances of, cancel culture, which is kind of like what we've been talking about on this channel this week. Going back to the example of John Raffman getting canceled for by some like anonymous Instagram account. Anyway, I really don't want to talk about John Raffman anymore. I'm really sick of it. But yeah, so getting into it, if you don't know what the GPCR is, it is, for better or for worse, most historians of the 20th century will admit that it is one of the most significant events that occurred over the last century. It was initiated like sometime in the mid 60s, I believe, and went on for like I think close to a decade. It was initiated by Mao, who at that point was old. Like the Communist Party had already been in power for like a few decades at that point. They were, running the country. They had done like their great leap forward, and they had, done the land reform and everything. They had like done a lot to change the country and to bring like a humongous majority of people out of abject poverty. But Mao, like throughout his entire career, was sensitive to a phenomenon that I'm just going to refer to as like ideological contamination. It's kind of like the idea that bourgeois ideology remains in even in socialism. Like China, before it succumbed to the capitalist rotors, was never like a communist utopia in like this strict sense, as like a kind of anarchistic society without hierarchy and without a state or politics. It was always socialism. Like it was actually existing socialism, meaning that there was still a state, there were still hierarchical structures that are needed to enforce like egalitarianism, social egalitarianism among the majority of the people. But Mao was always sensitive to what some people say is a central paradox of Leninism, which is that even within, for example, the Vanguard Party, within like the most advanced unit of the revolution, there's going to be necessarily remnants of bourgeois ideology. So Mao, like throughout his entire life, was sensitive to the possibility, to the very real possibility. He, in Assad's essay, he has like quotes where Mao is saying that like he thinks that it is going to happen inevitably, that the revolution fails and succumbs to the capitalist rotors, and Mao wanted to frame it in his thinking and in public discourse as like something that is definitely going to happen, in order to make everybody very sensitive and hyper aware of it, and like always be very on guard against it. So anyway, the GPCR, it's like this huge event in China. A lot of people died, but basically like so Mao kicked it off by like doing this big what do they call it, a big poster campaign at some university. I don't actually want to get too much into the history either, because I'm really not qualified. But basically like the object of it was to like purge the ranks of power of all the various institutions that were running China at the time, like universities, the party, other things as well, I'm sure there are other institutions like cultural institutions, whatever. But the idea was that like the people who had been occupying the most powerful positions in these institutions were the ones who were most likely to have been contaminated by bourgeois ideology and to, want to move the society back into capitalism. They were the bourgeois roaders, and the idea of the Cultural Revolution was to do like a big hit refresh on China, and move all these people out of the halls of power and replace them with other people, fresh voices who had not been contaminated, who had not been occupying these privileged positions for so long. And so the first of the concepts that I want to talk about here is that Asad lays out is called dismissal, which is where you have, again, like some guy who's like working for the state or whatever. He's like pretty high up. He has a lot of power in even this socialist, like highly egalitarian society. There's, again, is socialism, not communism, so there's still hierarchical power structures. But this state functionary, this apparatchik, he has power even in this egalitarian society, and he's living in a city as well that comes into play. But he becomes contaminated with bourgeois ideology, and you got to get rid of him. And one way to do that, which I don't even know if we need to really historicize it. It's basically firing. Like Asad talks about how it goes. It's like some kind of tradition that like goes back to the 15th century or the 16th century in China. But I'm not really like there's nothing complicated. It's firing somebody. It's like but the important distinction here is that it's power exercised from above. So you really need like a more powerful agent to fire an agent who is already in power, to like get rid of them and put in somebody new who has not been there, who has presumably not been infected with bourgeois ideology. So that is one concept, dismissal. And then you have another concept called pluralization. At least that is the terminology that is being used in this essay, so I'm just going to follow along with that. Excuse me. But yeah, so pluralization, it's kind of like the grassroots version of the same thing. Like Mao led this cultural revolution. He, again, he was sensitive to the presence of bourgeois ideology within the halls of power. And he still, even though he wasn't, involved in the day-to-day operations of the party, he still had a lot of like cultural pull. He was still a very powerful figure. And he led like the masses to bombard the headquarters. He like thought that the time had come to like hit refresh on China, and he wanted to get rid of everybody who was occupying the halls of power and just like reconfigure things and like get rid of the threat of bourgeois ideology and China taking the capitalist road. And he wanted to I guess like institute some kind of policies that would guarantee this constant renewal of power and whoever it is that is occupying these privileged positions, so that it wouldn't just depend on him manually doing this revolution every whatever couple of years or whatever. But so yeah, you can get rid of people by exercising power from above, dismissal, firing one boss, firing another. Or you can go the other way from the bottom, pluralization, which is kind of where you like pit the power of the masses against the power of the institution through mass mobilization, it's like a tactic that Mao was relying on throughout his entire career. It's what got him to do a successful revolution in China by mobilizing the peasantry, which were an overlooked class, but still like the humongous majority of the population of China. Anyway, so pluralization is, mobilizing the people to like fight back against the institution. And it's also like vacating the institution and forming new institutions, forming new organizational structures. This is why we call it pluralization, is because instead of like having all this energy and all this power focused in one spot, you kind of disperse it, and you have like a more a plurality of institutions. So instead of having like maybe one university system or whatever, you have like a bunch or whatever. Anyway, so the idea here, the kind of like the thesis of Asad's essay, is that when you combine these two different impulses of firing people and like forming new institutions and like having a plurality of power structures, you end up with something called factionalism, which is when you have like different institutions that are competing with each other and are kind of trapped in this negative, like reactionary spiral where they are not contributing to a positive vision. They are not building something, but rather they have, like the masses, the people are, forming new organizations in order to like decentralize power and ensure that society is becoming always more and more democratic and egalitarian, so that power is not trapped within this one particular configuration, this one apparatus. So they're forming all these new institutions, but at the same time, they want to like have power exercised from above and like fire people. I mean, we can say it like, instead of firing, canceling people, except that canceling in China at this time meant, execution or like, dying in prison or something. Like some instances of cancellation today are serious. Some are, social media mobs, but regardless, China during the GPCR was like the gold standard of cancellation. It's the, most powerful example of that particular phenomena. Anyway, so you have like all these institutions popping up, and then they're kind of like competing with each other. And there's this one anecdote in this essay where like one of the most famous Red Guards in the country, in China, like called Mao up and was like crying to him and like saying, "Why don't you fire this guy from this other like I think it's like a university department or something that he was like in competition with?" And Mao was like, "Why would I do that?" Basically, he didn't think that it made any sense for them to be like exercising power from the top like that. And so anyway, like when you get these two psychological kind of and like social motives in combination with each other, pluralization and dismissal, you get factionalism, which is just a bunch of different organizations competing with each other in a negative sense, again trapped in this kind of spiral, rather than like competing with each other in any kind of positive sense, contributing towards a shared project in solidarity and trying to like build something new. It's really a negative thing. And this is where we get the third concept, which is de-politicization. Basically, de-politicization is just what I've been saying. It's when like these different organizations, these different institutions are competing with each other, but they're not really like contributing to building anything new. They're not operating on some kind of like principled political like ideology or shared kind of manifesto between them, but really they're just trying to tear each other down. So that's all I'll say for this video. This is just kind of some conceptual and like a little bit of historical background. And in the next video tomorrow, I'll be trying to relate this and the GPCR to the contemporary phenomena in a more concrete sense, and try to just like kind of make it all fit together and make a bit more sense. So I'll see you then.